Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and today I want to talk about the future of Destiny 2 after the final shape and how the game can be more successful long term after that next DLC does drop, because I do think there's a lot of reservations among the player base on the direction of the game, and there are some suggestions that I want to personally make that I think could help the game over the long haul. Keeping in mind, I'm not a game developer, so I don't know how realistic all of these are, but I tried to keep them as reasonable as possible, keeping in mind what we've seen in the past of Destiny and Destiny 2, and using that as a guide for future changes we might see. First off, I do think that we have a lot of weapons right now that don't feel entirely useful. We get a lot of weapons that are essentially just filler. And that's something that I think needs to change over the long haul. Whether there are more weapons that are more niche and fill only certain build roles, or if we get more variety of new weapon types. We saw it this season with the brand new rocket sidearm that has really been something to chase for the community. Now, can they add a brand new weapon type every single new update, the episodes that they have coming after the final shape? That I don't know. But separating the weapons and maybe making either less weapons so that they're more impactful, more of a reason to chase them, or taking longer times between dropping new weapons, maybe an extra month or two, in order to develop more weapons that are unique feeling, because that's really what's lacking in Destiny 2. I would personally be fine with something like sunsetting or a power cap, so that way we do have something of a loot refresh. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but there's a reason that every MMO has essentially a power cap. So then when you go into new content for a new DLC, you have to chase the new weapons first, and then maybe over time you can upgrade your old weapons, as well as having the new weapons and armor and all that kind of good stuff. Destiny 2 doesn't have that. I know it's a more casual friendly game than a lot of those MMOs, but at the same time, there really feels like a lack of desire to chase loot. So no matter how good a activity is, you're not going to replay it over and over and over and over again if the loot isn't worth the chase. Eventually, every activity gets tiresome, regardless of how good it is. It could be a raid, a dungeon, or anything like that. But speaking of raids and dungeons, I think this desire to have 2 raids and 2 dungeons every single year has been part of the stagnation of Destiny 2, because we're not getting a new type of content that is innovative that could replace something like a raid or dungeon. Everyone loves dungeons, everyone loves raids for the most part, but I do think it's time for new types of activities. They tried to give that to us with Forsaken and Gambit, but that was obviously not as well received as they would have liked. I would argue Gambit is actually a very good game mode, just with the wrong crowd for the most part for this game, and I think there's got to be new innovation. The problem is, if they bring forward a new game mode and it is not successful, then there's the potential to waste a lot of resources like they have with Gambit. What they could possibly do, and my suggestion would be something like a horde mode or a wave-based mode like we saw in Destiny 1 a little bit more of, where you could have rounds and additional rewards. We're already seeing it with the coil activity, where you can have something where it's like escalating difficulty with additional rewards, but instead of maybe traversing to different locations, you just have an arena like Prison of Elders from Destiny 1, and just have maybe a leaderboard. Maybe even the top 1,000 players can possibly hit that leaderboard on how far you can go forward with your builds and everything like that, with progressive difficulty. I think that's something that would really benefit Destiny 2. But whatever they do, we do need a permanent, long-term activity that is going to recapture the imaginations. We've seen raids. Maybe they do something like a 12-person raid. Maybe they do something like 8-person strikes or 9-person strikes or something like that. Something to really shake up the feeling of the game, because the lack of innovation is the one thing that I think is really holding Destiny 2 back right now. There's nothing that's come out recently where you've been like, wow, this is a absolute game changer, and I must play this all the time. The coil activity is a start in that direction. I do like the escalating difficulty and all that stuff. It's just a bit of an issue that you can't go even further. And after a while, once you hit the max, once you're able to beat the coil and get your platinum rewards, it's very easy to do that consistently, even with randoms. So having something that's going to be a bit more challenging as you get even further with rewards. The rewards don't even have to be weapons and armor. You can get additional loot, but an emblem that tells you how deep you've gone into the activity, something like that, noting how much progress you've made would be very beneficial. Same thing with the leaderboard or something like that. I've talked about this a lot. It doesn't necessarily have to be a horde mode. We could get a PvEVP zone that is almost like an extraction area, but I don't know if that's something that would be too much work. But again, like Gambit, but maybe not necessarily Gambit itself, where you have PvE and PvP both interacting. So I don't know what the answer is for there, but I do understand that the game needs a bit of a shakeup with its content. Another option for changes that I would personally like to see is the change to the storyline. I do think we would be better off getting the story all at the beginning of an episode rather than week by week. And that's a change from my opinion personally, because I do believe that I personally enjoy the weekly updates, but I also understand that Destiny is a game that they've made to where they want you to play all the time. And I think that burns out not only players, but also developers. Having everything available right from the beginning, some people will jump in and play through everything and say they've done everything and burn themselves out. And that's fine. At a certain point, you can't keep players from themselves. You have to let the players do what they're going to do anyway. Stop time gating everything. Just let everything out in the open as soon as a new season or episode or whatever drops, and then you will let the players play as they want. If they burn through everything right away and then they jump onto a different game, that's fine. If they come back weekly for whether it is you're doing your Iron Banner, whether it's coming back every week for trials, as you have rotating weapons, that's another good option. Whether you have activities that are rotating weekly, so that way you have a reason to come back instead of having just a little tiny bit of less than an hour of story content every single week. I don't think there's enough involved there, and so they artificially enhance that by having some filler. Now, that's just a personal preference there. I think for a long time, like I said, I was a big fan of the weekly updates. I do like looking forward to coming back to the game every single reset and just checking out what's new. But you could even space it out within the episode. You could have, at the beginning of the season, all the story content, then a third of the way through the season or something, you could drop the exotic mission and just space things out a little bit more to get everyone kind of engaged a little bit more long term. Now, other additional ideas that I would personally like to see: one, change crafting so it is not available on raid weapons. I think I miss the magic feeling of raid weapon drops being randomized and hoping that you'll get the roll that you want. That's something that I think crafting has took away a little bit of. Whereas I do like seasonal weapons being craftable, especially because there's a lot of times where the seasonal weapons won't be as strong as the base version or the adept versions of the raid weapons. So having that as an option could be something, but I personally think crafting is overall good for the game, even though I personally believe that there needs to be a better balance between rare god rolls to find that are not craftable versus craftable weapons that are still very good to add to your arsenal. And I think ultimately those rare god rolls, the weapons that are not craftable, should ultimately be stronger than the versions that are craftable, if at all possible. I know that's hard, and especially with power creep, but with power creep also, I think having additional difficulty options, like I said, a horde wave mode that has endless number of waves, is something that could be helpful, but something to let players challenge themselves if they find the game to be too easy without lessening the without increasing the difficulty for your average player, because I do think it's a heavily casual player base that you can see it when you do Fireteam Finder and random matchmaking. They do struggle with a lot of these different activities that some people take for granted and think is just a walk in the park. You look at Grandmasters, there's a lot of players who really struggle with those still, even though they've been out for a while. Anyway, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on the future of Destiny 2 and whether or not you would like to see additional changes made after the final shape, and if they would be successful and helpful in the long term. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. My name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.